The guest has arrived. The host is prepped and ready. Ladies and gentlemen, this is One-on-One with Bill Alexander.
Hi, everyone. Yours truly, William Eric Alexander. All my friends call me Bill, and you're on One-on-One with Bill Alexander. Glad you can join me today for a very fun program. At least it should be fun, because the gentleman I'm talking with has half of it, I guess, started already, because he has the right wardrobe on to get this program going today, which he is wearing his Pittsburgh Steelers jersey, and his terrible towel is behind him. As we talk to Marc Sheffler. Actually, he is a former Pittsburgher, but I guess I can say once a Pittsburgher, always a Pittsburgher, correct?
That is correct. I was, as you said that, I said, no, I'm just a Pittsburgher who lives in Los Angeles now.
There you go. So you and I had a few minutes to talk before we started this today. And the one thing I noticed is you lost that Pittsburghese, that accent.
Well, you can thank the Pittsburgh Playhouse for that. And a speech teacher I had there, who I think her last name was Sheldon, Miss Sheldon. She taught principles that were created by another speech teacher who I believe was at Carnegie Mellon for a while, Edith Warman Skinner. And we had a book called Speak with Distinction. And we used to have classes outside on, I think it was Craig Street and Forbes, where the old Playhouse was. And half the class would be on one side and the other half the class would be on the other, and the Forbes Avenue traffic was going by, and we had to talk to each other without shouting. And and then at the same time practice the principles of a very neutral dialect, so that when you're acting, you can then adopt other dialects, because you don't have one to overcome. I speak kind of, even though I lived in the South for a while and I lived in New York, I have a very neutral accent.
So before we get underway, Marc, explain to my audience who you are.
Oh. I'm a guy from Pittsburgh who, when he was 14, living with a single father, an aluminum siding salesman, a legendary aluminum siding salesman. One day we're in the Stanley Theater downtown, watching Jerry Lewis in The Nutty Professor. And at the end of the movie, according to what my father had told me, I stood up and I said something like, wow, Jerry Lewis is the funniest guy in the world, and what that life must be like being in the movies. And my dad just looked at me and said, well, maybe you'll find out someday. And I said, yeah, well, that's not really possible, I don't think. And my dad got mad at me in a funny way. And he said, what do you mean it's not possible? People do it every day. Why not you? And I had no answer for him. So we made that little deal that if I'll star in a movie that'll be at the Stanley, and he'll come with me in a limo to the premiere.
Okay.
So cut to 7 years later, Wes Craven's first film, Last House on the Left, opens up in Pittsburgh. I was one of the 4 stars of the movie. The production company sent me to Pittsburgh to do some press, and lo and behold, it opens up at the Stanley. So I'm the guy who had that unbelievable circumstance happen to him. I'm the guy who, when he was 10 years old, that same aluminum siding salesman father with like this unbelievably out of the box thinking pattern said to him, what do you want for your 10th birthday? And I said, the Three Stooges, and he got them for me. And they were doing a gig at the Holiday House. And on a Saturday afternoon around my birthday, my dad hired them to perform for a bunch of my friends and their families and their parents and everything. And while in the middle of the show, Mo stops the show and says, we're here to celebrate Marc's birthday. Where's Marc? So, I raised my hand. He said, Marc, stand up. So I stood up, and he said, in fact, come up on stage with us. So I went up on stage, and there I was on the stage of the Holiday House with the Three Stooges. I couldn't see the audience because of the lights, but
Right.
I could hear them and I could feel them. And I started interacting with the Stooges and doing their shit because I was a huge Paul Shannon guy. You know,
I was just going to ask that. Yeah.
I was a Paul Shannon kid. You know, I'd come home from school and change into my Stooge clothes, you know, and sit and watch TV for 2 hours. And like, so I started interacting, like I said, and I knew all their material. So I knew their bits. I knew their timing. I knew what they were doing. And in about, you know, a minute or two later, Mo stops everything again. And he puts his hand on my head and he says, I dub you the fourth Stooge. And the audience applauded and they laughed and they cheered. And all of a sudden I felt this tidal wave of comfort, this warm, ooh, there I was on stage with a microphone and saying things and doing things and people were laughing. And this is what I get back for it. And I felt like the most embraced, you know, like I didn't shiver like that when I lost my virginity. I didn't. This is, you know, this was a more life
changing moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting is you mentioned Paul Shannon and the Three Stooges, who had a very close connection to Paul Shannon and the Holiday House. But you had the Stooges there. It would have been Mo, Larry, and Curly Joe, right?
Curly Joe. There's a picture behind me. That picture I'm pointing to.
I see it.
Yeah, that's a picture of Mo, Larry, and Curly Joe DeRita and me at my birthday party.
Oh boy. So it's kind of neat to be able to hear that, because when you talk to people that grew up in this area, if they're not of your age or of my age, I'm in my mid 50s, they don't know any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And you try to tell them about it and they go, no, Pittsburgh wasn't big for nightclub acts and stuff like that.
Oh, yes, it was.
And they don't realize what the Holiday House was or all these venues that we had in town.
When my dad got out of World War II, he came back to Pittsburgh, and his uncle, my uncle Sonny Miller, owned a cafe bar in downtown Pittsburgh called Miller's Cafe.
Okay.
And my dad as soon as he came back from the service, my uncle gave him the job of general manager. And then they expanded out to a nightclub that was on Sawmill Run Boulevard called the Boogie Woogie Nut Club, right? And if just by the title of it, you can imagine it's a very kind of late 40s, early 50s vibe nightclub, right? So, or mid 40s to that time period. And my dad, as the manager of that place, and he was pals with Joey Bishop and Rummy Bishop, and every comedian and singer. They would bring big name talent. What you're talking about, these kids don't know. Pittsburgh has a huge entertainment history.
Right.
I mean, August Wilson's from the Hill District.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Billy Eckstein. They're tremendous artists who have come out of Pittsburgh.
And that's kind of amazing to hear. But now let's move to 1972, The Last House on the Left. I know no one knew who Wes Craven was at that time.
He was a tall, skinny, hippie-looking guy named Wes.
So how did he find you, or did you find him for this part?
I was doing comedy. I had moved to New York City from the Catskills, where I was working. I worked at the Raleigh as a stage manager. So quickly, the timeline was I stayed there for about a year, met comedian London Lee. I don't know if you remember the name.
Name is familiar, yes.
Yeah, London Lee was a comedian on the East Coast mostly, who was pretty well known. He had done Sullivan a few times and Carson, and he was in that circuit. And his whole shtick was that he came from a very wealthy family in New York. His father was in the garment business, and he was a poor little rich kid. You know, he had jokes like, when I was a kid, my father gave me a German Shepherd, not a dog, a real German Shepherd. You know, you could just comedically extrapolate out from that. And and he was very good, and people loved him, and he had excellent comedy writers. So I started out as his driver, and then, you know, schlepper, run errands for him and his wife. And then I wrote a couple of jokes for him that really worked. And then I became part of his act and stayed with him for a little under a year, ending up at 2 weeks at the Copa. I did stand up at the Copa
Oh,
Cabana.
wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I right after that, I lucked into meeting a management firm that wanted to represent me, and it happened to be the same managers that Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck had at the time, Lloyd Greenfield and Associates, and the manager who handled me, his name was Dick Towers. One day I walked into his office, which was in Rockefeller Center, and he said, hey, I have a movie audition for you. Go down to this address, ask for two guys, Wes and Sean, tell them I sent you, and do your best. So I go down and I meet a tall, skinny, blonde, hippie-looking guy named Wes, and a short, stubby guy with a mustache named Sean, both about 30 years old, 28, 29, in that area. And they tell me about the movie. They asked me to read a scene, and I read it, did it, and got back to Dick's office about a half hour later, and they had already called to say, that's the guy we want.
And let me just say that one of your stills for that movie is not one of the most flattering pictures out there, but it comes up everywhere when we look for you online.
When I'm blowing my head off?
Yeah.
Yeah, figured. Yeah, my dad couldn't watch that scene. He could watch the whole movie, but not that scene.
So how was it? What was it like working with Wes Craven? And did you have a friendship with him after he made it big?
Yes, great, and yes. And first of all, you have to understand that, as with anybody I've worked with or know, for whether it's Wes or Robin Williams or Letterman or any of these guys, back then they weren't those who they became.
Right.
They were. So Wes was a tall, skinny, hippie-looking guy with stringy blonde hair named Wes. He didn't become Wes Craven until later. He was an innate storyteller visually. He knew exactly what he wanted. What he didn't know technically or experientially on Last House, he was able to get by instinctively. So the whole experience was amazing. I learned the fundamentals of everything I know about production during that 4 weeks in Connecticut. And even though we didn't have a ton of money to spend, hardly anything, the basic, rudiments of filmmaking remain the same.
So on what I'm looking at, it said you made $400 on that film.
$400. I got $100 a week. In fact, I wrote a joke about it. I said, when I got my first paycheck from Last House, I went into the city to New York to cash it, and the teller looked at it and laughed and asked me, how would I like this, heads or tails?
So earlier you were talking about the Playhouse. Are you a graduate of Point Park?
I'm not a graduate, but I attended there. I went and I had fun and I did stuff, and then I just kind of longed to go to for real. I didn't like I wasn't a school person in my life. I sometimes wish I was more, but no.
So what did you study when you were there?
At Point Park? Oh, I was part of the Playhouse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in fact, I'm an original member of the Pittsburgh Ballet Company. I was in that company its first season with Nicholas and Mary Petrov.
Wow.
Yeah, I played the dancing bear in the Nutshell. I had two parts. An opening curtain. I was the house servant on the ladder lighting the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And the guy who took Drosselmeyer's coat from Drosselmeyer, of course, and gave it to and handed the present to Clara. And then I have to jump out of that costume and go around the back of the old Playhouse, back to Psych, and into my other costume, which was the dancing bear. So the humorous thing about that and all the performances that we did, the hat or the headpiece of the bear costume, I couldn't wear my glasses underneath it, so I couldn't see shit. So I could hear the music, and the girl who was playing Clara, this little 8-year-old girl, I told her beforehand, like during the first dress rehearsal, that I can't see. You have to lead me. I have to. I know what space I'm in, but I really can't see that well. So we did, I don't know, 15, 20 performances. I couldn't see shit in the second half.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, the Playhouse, the original, they tore down.
Yeah.
And they rebuilt a new one, but I really like the old one because I was there many a time. So
yeah, broke my heart when I heard that.
Kind of interesting. They also mentioned your sister still lives back in Pittsburgh.
I have a sister who lives there.
Where she live?
Upper St. Clair.
Oh, okay. So you still have a connection to the burg and everything else, which is kind
I'll
of
always have a connection. It's just, you know, right. When you're from Pittsburgh, it's not like being from most places. Pittsburgh, there's a whole history with it. So yeah.
So when I go through your list of credits, you worked on episodes of Sister Sister, Harry and the Henderson, Who's the Boss, Charles in Charge. I mean, the Happy Days reunion show, even How Bugs Bunny Won the West.
That was my first big network show. Yeah.
Why hasn't there been a good sitcom dealing with Pittsburgh?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I am, as we speak, in the process of trying to find a name actor, male, to play the lead in a show that I call Those 7 Years, and it's I've written the pilot, and those 7 years are the 7 years from when I made that promise and deal with my father until he rides to the Stanley with me in the limousine, and everything that happened in between. And pretty much the entire show, except for the last part of the last season, takes place in Pittsburgh. So and it starts in 1963 and it goes through to 1971 to Last House is Open.
Have you contacted Michael Keaton?
I know I knew Michael back in the day. Michael's actually is an extraordinary actor, but is too old. I need someone who's in their 40s. I need somebody to play my father, and I need somebody in the 40s. We're out to a fairly humongously named actor. We have a list. I'm partners with a guy named Gary Hart, my producing partner. Gary was the president of Paramount Network Television for about 13 years. And we go back to my Charles in Charge days when he was executive at Universal. So we're out. We're at CAA right now with a couple of big name actors, and fingers crossed.
Well, I hope it actually happens, because that'd be kind of fun. Now, would you shoot everything here, or would you do it on a?
Well, the way you would do this is you look at all the scripts and you say, what exteriors do I need? Okay. And you come back and you shoot all the exteriors. But I would be dressing everything back to 1963, so 64. So that's always fun. And I don't know. I mean, I say here, but a lot of those decisions are not mine. Even though I'm the executive producer, those are financial decisions.
Right.
And probably wherever the best deal is where we would make it.
Well, they just got done wrapping up, I guess it's a Netflix series called A League of Their Own, which is they remade that and they shot in the Pittsburgh area.
Oh, great.
So this area has been.
I'm open. I'd love to, because I would love to come back and shoot a series there.
Trust me, if you need an extra that's 55 or above, I'm available.
If I come back, listen, make you a promise, okay?
Yeah.
If I come back, if this thing actually happens, right? And I come back there to make the show, and you know about it, send me an email and I will put you in there somewhere.
I will do that. I will hold you to that.
I promise you, because it's not really a big deal to do that. I don't want you, from my end, it wouldn't be like nothing. It would be say, hey, this guy's a friend of mine. Just give him something to do in the diner. That's it. That's all I would have.
Hey, that works for me. I mean, hey, so I go through your list of credits and some of the people you've met, and you mentioned earlier Robin Williams.
Yes.
When did you meet Robin?
Well, Robin and I arrived, I got to LA in February of 76, and then started working at the Comedy Store, I believe late March, April of 76. So I met Robin and got there like I think a couple of weeks before me, but only a couple of weeks, because when I met him, he was just Robin from San Francisco.
Right.
I was Marc from Pittsburgh. Michael Keaton was the other guy from Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
So that's
So have you seen any of the trailers for the new Robin Williams film?
no,
Because I guess there's the guy that's playing Robin
right.
is
Oh, you mean
must
that
be.
I don't know if that's a film or an actual film, or it's something that somebody's trying to launch as a film.
I think they're trying to launch it because they have the character playing Pam Dauber in that. But the guy that's playing Robin, when he hears about Jim Belushi passing away, or John Belushi passing away, he is Robin in my opinion. And I was just curious if you had the opportunity to see that.
I haven't seen that moment, but I've seen a few other moments that, I don't know. I have a kind of odd, I don't know if it's odd reaction to it. I don't know if enough time has passed. I mean, his kids are on social media, and his ex-wife is on social media, or his wife was on, Robin was a really nice, purest performer I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just this guy was, he was like Tiger Woods of performing, just the most natural thing ever for him. And he was a really nice fella. He was a really good guy.
Because and with you just saying what you said, I was going to ask you that if you feel there's enough time passed. Now, a lot of people, younger kids who know him mainly from the voice from Aladdin and some of the stuff he did after that, don't realize that he did stand up or did Happy Days or Mork and Mindy or that stuff. And do you think that that's why they're trying to do this now, or are they just trying to capitalize on the name?
Yeah, nobody's trying to introduce him to anyone. They're just trying to capitalize.
Okay.
There's no doubt in my mind about that. No one's that altruistic. Like, let me enlighten an entire generation. It's my mission in life is to open the world to Robin Williams. No. It's for money.
Well, I thought I would be nice about it because I know they're doing the film now.
That's another thing that offends me, right? That's a whole other. If his family was behind it, right? If his kids were behind it, then that's a whole other thing, because then they have input and they become part of it. But to do something kind of ex parte from them, just to capitalize on who Robin was, that's just fucked.
Now, a question for you is because right now, after all these years, Lucy Arnaz is doing the piece about her mother and father meeting the Ricardos.
Correct. But that's what I said. Lucy Arnaz is involved in it.
So again, because Lucy's involved with it, could have it happened 10 years after Lucy died and there wouldn't have been an issue.
I think, like I said earlier, as long as somebody who was like, obviously a good connected member of the family, like Lucy or anyone is involved, then it kind of like sanctions, it gives it street cred. It takes it away from the pandering nonsense of it.
So of all the programs you've worked on, are there any that stand out?
Well, some of them stand out for different reasons. That's like How Bugs Bunny Won the West. That stands out to me because it was the first network show that I ever wrote. Sanford stands out to me because it was the first network sitcom that I wrote.
And I didn't realize you wrote that. And I thought that when I was reading stuff today and I'm going, I remember that. I mean, okay. I do. I really do.
Different, like Co-Ed Fever, which was a nonsense ripoff of Animal House, is special to me, and because I made some good friends there and some people I care a great deal about still. So everything you take from everything, for the most part, something good besides the money.
Okay.
It could be a relationship. It could be a shitty show that you write a great script for. This whole entertainment industry career thing, it's an ongoing journey. And I try to, I really do. I try to take something positive from every work experience.
So when you did the Happy Days reunion show, now being a guy observer from the outside watching this, you write this program, and basically what you're doing is they're dropping in sequences of the show or the previous show.
Well, okay. Continue, and then I'll tell you what we actually did.
Okay, so that's what I'm going to ask you. So did you put the words in Marion Ross's mouth? Like, why can't I think of his name? Anton Williams, Donnie Most,
Donnie Most, Ronnie Howard. Yeah, no, we didn't put the words in their mouths. What Sam and I did, Sam Denoff, my writing producing partner, what Sam and I did was we screened every episode, all 226 episodes of the show. We had personal conversations, because a lot of the people we knew already, right? So, you know, like Sam and Ron Howard were old friends, and I knew Ron casually because I knew Ron and Brian Grazer, his producing partner. Somebody, so everybody knew so we weren't, and Sam and Gary Marshall were peers, were
right.
Started together, worked on Dick Van Dyke together. So it was more like we just had conversations, you know, like ABC wanted to do the show. We didn't tell the actors what to say, but we did construct, we pulled the episodes to watch, you know, we pulled the clips, we constructed the overall narrative of the show, and then the actors in their interviews filled in the spaces in between those things that we had, kind of a skeleton structure that we put together.
Because I was always curious about that. And also when you went through all the episodes to put the reunion show together, did you feel that, I mean, because some of us did, because the term jumping the shark,
yes,
came from Happy Days. Did you feel that there was a natural time for the program to end, but they just kept pushing it further?
No, well, no, and I'll tell you why. Because when you look at all 226 episodes of something, you then kind of get a real-time understanding of what the show was about, right? So in sitcoms, for the most part, the show is about one or two people.
Right.
So this Happy Days started, I mean, this I know because I talked to Gary and I talked to Ronnie and Henry. Happy Days started out, it was Ronnie's character, Richie Cunningham, who was the star of the show. And that was in the first season when it was a single camera, because it changed the way they changed the way they made the show in the second season. So it was a single camera show. And Henry Winkler's character was kind of like this brooding outsider, right?
Okay.
And who in the pilot didn't even have a line. He had a gesture and a "e." That's all he had. And he wasn't wearing a leather jacket. He was wearing a cloth jacket.
Right.
Right. So what happened was they do the show and the audience reacts a certain way. And that way was to throw the love to Henry Winkler and the Fonz. And not anything disrespectful to Richie, I mean to Ronnie, but the lion's share of the mail was going to the Fonz. So Henry and Ronnie had a conversation about that. And they just said, look, you know, it ain't up to us. It's whatever way the audience goes. And they're both wonderful, wonderful people. Henry and Ronnie are like two of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And they just said, look, wherever it goes, it goes. And we're just going to have fun with it. So when I get back to what I said about understanding what the show was about, if you look at the show in its totality, you understand that the show, you look at where Henry Winkler's character was at the beginning of the show. And as it moved through the first couple of 3, 4, 5 seasons, right? Until one day the character took a turn. And by the end of the show, he was an upstanding member of society. So If you look at the character arc of the show, it was the change of life that the body of the show, the events and the stories and the drama and the emotion of the show had on Henry's character, on the Fonz, that made him go from being this bicycle, leather jacket, tough guy to the complete opposite. That's what the show was about.
So going back, when you talked to Gary, because I guess the program, if I remember correctly, because I was very young at the time, was actually originally seen, or at least the idea was seen on Love American Style, correct?
Yes. Well, it was from a vignette that they did on Love American Style.
And
from a vignette.
What made him think that from the vignette they could take it and make a whole series out of it?
You had to know Gary Marshall to answer that question. Yeah. Well, let me see. I got an idea. I'm gonna make this happen. I see it big. I'm gonna have guys there, but I'm not gonna put it in New York. I'm gonna put it there somewhere. Milwaukee. We'll put it in Milwaukee. So he was the guy had a mind. And it was terrific. But that's that's what people do. They ask themselves, what if? Like, what if that? Those are the two words that unlock the imagination. If you just ask yourself, what if?
That's what's amazing about people like you who can come up with an idea and flesh it out into a script, a series, whatever it is. Because I can come up with something and I can probably go 2 paragraphs and I'm lucky. But
Yes.
yet you can take it and flesh it out to something that people want to see.
There's a downside to that.
Okay.
Are you a married man by any chance?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Does your wife ever look at you and say, who are the people inside your head you're talking to now? Okay. No. Okay. My wife does that all the time. Like she said, are you here? Are you talking to anybody? Is there anybody in your head now? Because we need to talk about the gardener. And I said, can you tell the people in your head to shut up so that we can? Yeah, there's a downside to it. I guess, we live in a bubble, the people you're talking about, and we're able to do that. It's a lot of fun. It's like confounding sometimes because you literally are hearing a bunch of different voices in your head. So
other than the one you're working on right now, the 7 years, do you have ideas or the first 7? Do you have ideas?
7 years.
Okay. I'll get it right eventually. Don't worry. So do you have ideas popping in and out of your head all the time?
I do. And I write them down. I have notebooks all over my office. I do, but I'm concentrating on this show because it's a story I really want to tell.
Okay. Because I'm looking through the list of things that you did, like you did Charles in Charge.
Yes.
What was unique about working with Scott Baio and his character? Well,
the whole show was a very well-run production. The executive producer was a fellow named Al Burton, who came out of Norman Lear's camp. And the executive producers who were the showrunners were a husband and wife team named Bill and Kathy Greer, who were like the no drama king and queen of executive producers back then. Like, they ran a show that was as smooth as could be. And Al Burton had a rule, and that was don't pitch him any episode idea that didn't begin with the word Charles. So everything was very simplified. Now, as far as Scott is concerned, he was nothing but professional. Mm-hmm. He was nothing but nice to everyone. He was a natural for that medium. He knew he grew up in the business, so he knew everything. And he was a really easy guy to work with. Just really easy to work with. He'd pop into the writer's room occasionally, but never a problem, never anything.
Because a while ago I spoke to one of the did a guest appearance. Her name is Diane Franklin. She played the princess whenever there was a love relationship going on. She was on there, and she was in the movie Better Off Dead. And we were talking, and she said the same thing about him, that he was nothing but professional. It was a great set to work on and everything else. And I was just kind of curious if it was one person or did everybody feel that way?
No, it was you know, it was a great job. I mean, it was because you look forward to coming to work, right? There was no, like I said, there was no drama. I was partners with Lee Aronson at the time. Lee went on to co-create Two and a Half Men with Chuck Lorre. And that's actually where Lee met and Chuck Lorre met. Chuck had an episode of
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll be darned. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So when you look at this stuff right now, we are seeing all this nostalgia coming back where they're taking the main characters from a program 20, 30 years ago and then putting them back on screen again as older characters of themselves. Could you see them doing something like that with a Charles in Charge? Because I heard rumors that they're doing it with Who's the Boss.
Yeah, I heard that same thing that Norman Lear is doing it with Tony. I heard that.
And do you think we're doing it because we want to go back to our childhood, or there's just no other good stories out there?
Well, that we, the pronoun we, the ubiquitous we, it's decisions that are made by executives in networks and streaming services and production companies. So what decisions are made that, like Tony Danza, if you own a network or a streaming service, and Tony Danza comes to you and says, I want to do Who's the Boss again. I want to do it. Yeah, I'm gonna come back and do it. It was, I'm the older guy, be an older guy. But if listen, for the amount of money that would cost to actually produce those shows, if you can make a deal with Tony, it's absolutely worth doing.
Really?
Yes, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer to do that.
Because I know that they're doing another live program this coming week on ABC dealing with different strokes and the facts of life.
Nice.
And I'm having an issue with it because why are they having adults play children's roles, which I still don't understand that one.
Well, you have to watch. Maybe that's the way the script is written. Maybe it's forward.
Growing up, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I just find it interesting. Kevin Hart being Arnold Drummond, I can see that's the one I can see for sure. But again, it's just interesting to see that. Now, when you mentioned the streaming services, do you see the streaming services playing a bigger part in programming that is going to be in the future, like what you're working on right now?
I think that's the direction it's going because, when we were kids, television watching was very regimented, right? You came home from school, you maybe watched a little Paul Shannon, you did your homework, you had your dinner, and that space in between was when you were watching Bonanza and the show and actually whatever you were watching. But we don't live in that regimented world anymore. We're on the go, whether we're sitting at home or not. We're kind of like intellectually on the go, right? So no one, it isn't appointment TV anymore. People record things with DVRs and they watch on streaming and what. So I think yes, the answer to that is yes, and there'll be more of them. There'll be a lot more as they acquire access to content, because that's what it's about. It's about content.
Would you be open for a streaming service to take your program, or were you trying to get network?
No, I'm trying. Listen, the way I wrote it and the language I use, there's no network that would put it on the way I wrote it. And I wouldn't put it. I wouldn't sanitize it just to be on a network.
Because I was going to ask you that question next. Would you clean it up to be able to do it on it?
I wouldn't, because that's not how it was. It was like nothing I say in any scene didn't really happen. That's the beauty of it.
And that's what I think is really interesting, that you're going to be able to write, or you have written about yourself in a way that you're going to be able to retell the story. Now, how much of it is based in fact, and how much of it has been spiced up to keep an audience going?
Well, look, the way I've structured, let's say hypothetically, I could get someone to say, yeah, I want to do this. I have it now structured out where it's about 10 episodes a season for 7 seasons, because it's those 7 years.
Those 7 years.
Right. So I have the beginning. I wrote the pilot. Everything in the pilot is actually happened. It's 100% true the way it happened.
Okay.
Okay. And I've been a really lucky guy. I have had some unbelievably extraordinary luck. And part of the underlying narrative of the show is the protagonist, the kid, is his luck, is his balls that he got from his father and his luck. And he puts the two of those together and makes what happens at the end of the series happen. It's luck and balls. So, you know.
Is there any series out there that you did not work on that you wish you would have?
Yeah, I would have liked to have worked on Seinfeld. I think that would have been a lot of fun and a great credit. All in the Family. I wish I was older, kind of,
Right.
and had done that, because that was. And then I again lucky, right? When I was a kid, I was a huge fan of the Dick Van Dyke Show, which I thought, just because for a variety of reasons, not the least of which that it introduced me to the concept that a person can be a comedy writer and earn a great living,
Right.
So I started thinking about myself beyond being a comedian, like, thinking of myself as a writer. So I noticed that a lot of the episodes that I really liked were written by a team, Sam Denoff and Bill Persky. And Sam Denoff, right? Well, turns out years later, I become writing, producing partners with Sam Denoff. So weird shit has happened to me in my career. Well, I mean, good weird shit, right?
Right.
So, I just believe that as long as I'm around, right, and I can write, that I'll get this done. If I can get some name actor to want to take the ride with me.
So I was looking on your list, and I guess there's one they actually marked that didn't do very well, and that was the Little Shop of Horrors pilot.
Yeah, that was a deal. It was weird. I got a call from my agent one day and said, "You know what Little Shop of Horrors is, right?" I said, "Yes." He said, "How'd you like to write the pilot?" I said, "They're making a pilot?" He said, "Well, we don't know if they're making a pilot, but somebody wants a script written." And I said, "Well, why don't they just get the guy who wrote the play and the movie?"
Right.
They said, "They want a sitcom writer." I said, "Okay." So I took a crack at it. I have no idea. I turned it in, got paid, did the best I could at the time. I don't fucking know these things. Those are decisions way above, a lowly writer's pay grade.
I can't imagine taking that and turning it into a series, because I think the novelty would wear off so quick.
Probably, maybe somebody just look. A lot of times back in those days, I don't know how it is now because I haven't been involved as much. But back in those days, some studio or network executive would, get a feather up his or her ass and, say, "I'd like to see a script on this," and they just hire a writer and order a script. That could be what happened.
So you also did The Best of the Hollywood Palace, which
Correct.
had to be really interesting to do that because of all the acts that were on the Hollywood Palace when it was in its heyday.
Yeah. That's again one of those things where Sam and I just screened, hours and hours and hours of shows, and we got Suzanne Summers to host it. And we went into a little studio in Burbank and shot the ins and outs and put it together in post. And that was that. Yeah, but it was fun. It was interesting to watch all those, I don't remember who we used, but I know it was a fun gig to do because we got a chance to see a lot of kind of obscure and interesting talent.
And again, other than the Three Stooges, when you met when you were 10 years old, was there any actor or writer that you met that you were in awe of when you first met the guy or the woman?
Well, I've met a lot of people. I've never really been in awe of anyone. I got over that quickly. My dad was pals with the Pittsburgh Pirate team. That was like if you imagine like this 1960 team.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my dad used to hang out with those guys, and I did too. We'd go to the games and then hang out at Gustine's afterwards with them. So I kind of got over that awe thing. Like I've been around, like Spielberg and Michael Douglas and Tom Cruise, and it just, I think I have to work with these people. It's like, I have to think way beyond that. I can be impressed with somebody's work. Like, you know, I think Spielberg's like a fucking amazing director who, you know, just keeps on chugging and making massive storytelling statements with film. You know, Wes was a good guy, but nah, I don't get that awe thing, you know.
Even when you met Gary Marshall?
No, because I met Gary Marshall through a friend.
Okay.
You know, so I met a lot of people like Danny Arnold and Norman Lear, and you know, I met a lot of these people with Sam, that older generation.
Right.
You know, I would look at somebody with, I'll tell you a story if we have time for a quick story.
We got plenty of time.
Okay, so the Hard Rock Cafe opens up in Beverly Hills, and I don't know, sometime in the I'm going to say in the 80s, early 80s, 80s. No, wait, it would have to be like late 80s. So Sam and I were driving around Beverly Center and we saw it, and we said, let's go in and check it out. We parked the car and we go in, and Sam looks around and he sees someone at a booth, a man sitting by himself, and he said, oh, there's Neil. So we go over, and the guy looks at Sam and goes, Sam. Sam says, Neil. And Neil says, sit down. And he says, Neil, this is my partner, Marc. Marc, this is Neil Simon.
Wow.
So, you know, and we're all, so like 10 minutes later, we're ordering dinner, and I'm sitting there and I'm having dinner with Neil Simon. And he was in there because he had just broken up with Marcia Mason, or I think for the second time, and he was looking for girls. He was just he was in there looking for girls.
How old was he at the time?
Well, I'm going to say this was late 80s. Whatever the, you know, I don't know. He's probably in his 50s.
Oh, okay.
You know, late 50s, early 60s.
That's funny,
right? And so when you have moments, I've had lots of those kind of moments, right? So when you have enough of those, the veneer of who someone is professionally is perceived by the public, at least as far as, you know,
right, I understand,
gets pierced very quickly.
Yeah. So before I let you go, we were talking in the beginning that you went back to doing stand-up. How were you doing stand-up for years before you started writing, or simultaneously?
I did all those shows with London Lee, like 150 shows in the Catskills. I was a small part of his act. And then I got to do it at the Copa. So then I was going around to clubs after I left London. Before Last House, I was doing comedy, stand-up at, you know, little shitbag clubs in the city. And when I got out here, I sold the script, the first script I ever wrote. Again, the lucky thing, right? And got out here. I had William Morris as an agent immediately, like the day I landed. And they asked me, you know, what else I wanted to do. And I said, well, I did stand up. So they got me in at the Comedy Store. And I did stand up there for several years until my writing career got to such a point where I had to make a decision.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I didn't want to go on the road. I didn't want to be like a road comedian. You know, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have a family at some point, and I didn't want to be a father who was like a voice at the other end of the phone.
Right.
So I went in the direction of writing, and hadn't done stand-up in 35 years since, you know, before the time I quit, and then when I went back to it. So,
do you like doing stand-up?
Oh man, I'll tell you. It's, you know, it's like it's the most fun. I used to think it's the most fun you can have in life with your clothes on.
Okay.
But now at 72, I think it's basically the most fun I can have in my life. Yeah, man, it's a fucking trip. It's just, I mean, you watch that little clip, right?
Yeah.
So the whole show is like that. I had 26 minutes of that. And I'm chasing that feeling I got when I was 10 years old. You know,
Mhm.
it's like my heroin. It's like I'm chasing that dragon. Only that
So
dragon.
how often do you perform now, or do you just when you feel
Well,
like it?
just when I feel like it. Although, you know, as you can see, I shaved my beard. My beard's not as long as it was.
Yes, I saw that.
So I got tired of waking up like with hair in my mouth and whatever. So I trimmed it. So I think I'm doing something in late January, February. So by that time, it'll be back in, and you know, my fighting length, and I'll be ready to don the black clothes. And you know, my wife said to me every time she watches me get dressed to do a show, it's the closest she'll ever come to watching Bruce Wayne become Batman. Because I'm such another person. And you watch that character, I'm such another person than he is.
Well, I noticed that because I'm watching this going, this isn't the same guy I talked to on the phone a few weeks ago and now talking to you now. Yeah,
No.
it's a totally different persona. Now, I'm going to ask you this because unfortunately I won't ever, I can't say never, but won't see you perform live. Is there any type of plan of recording what you do to put it online or in some situation?
Yes, I have the show that I did recently, along with about 6 or 7 other one minute little clips like I sent you with that typewriter thing. And the entire show is being edited and tightened, and you know, I have an editor working on it. And as soon as that's done and all that material is ready, then I ship it over to my social media guy that I hired recently, and he'll be putting it out everywhere he can.
And that's the other thing I wanted to ask you too, with what we're seeing right now with social media, with streaming services, do you feel that your career, if it would have started today, would be different than it did when you actually did start?
Well, of course. I mean, I would have had different parameters. You know, I would have like everybody else, we would have had different rules of engagement to play by, right? Back in my day, you know, when people were getting started, you needed management was the most important thing, even before an agent, a good manager. And those managers, like Jerry Seinfeld's manager, George Shapiro, who also managed Sam Denoff, right? They used to hang out at the Comedy Store. Bernie Brillstein used to hang out at the Comedy Store, and Bud Robinson would hang out at the Comedy Store. Rick Bernstein would hang out at the Comedy Store or the Improv, and that's where they would meet talent. Today, everything's online and on your phone and social media. And so, you know, I hired a young guy, who's a fan of the character of Elliot, and I said, all right, you know, put me out there. And don't say you wouldn't see Elliot live. You know, the circumstances could bring me to Elliot.
I was just going to ask you if you could see him coming to Pittsburgh.
Well, you know, of course. Sure. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So this week, the Steelers have a 4-day turnaround for a game on Thursday night.
Yeah, I know.
What do you think is going to happen?
I don't know, man. They've been hard to I'd have to ask my uncle. I have a 93-year-old uncle who lives in Pittsburgh. My father's brother.
And any thoughts about Roethlisberger retiring?
Look, you know, how long can you do that? How long can you do that at the level that he's used to doing it at? There's nothing sadder, I think, than a once champion athlete who can't let go. And you know, nobody wants to see an athlete in decline. People want to see an athlete on the way up at his or her peak, and then make room for somebody else. And you know, and I know some professional athletes. I know I have a very close friend who's a one-time big star on the PGA Tour, and I know it was tough to turn 50, you know, and have to not do that, you know. So that's a whole other world, you know. But where you need your body, like me, I just need my mind and my mouth. You know, I could be a head, still do stand up. They could bring me in a little box like Senor Wences and, put the phone there. All right, it's good. All right, it's good.
Actually, that should be your new gimmick. I like that.
I'm still working on this gimmick. I haven't fully actuated this gimmick yet.
Well, I finally figured out after all these years I can be a ventriloquist by wearing a mask. So
there you go, right?
Yep, I finally figured out my next career. Well, Marc, thank you very much. This was a pleasure.
Thank you, Bill.
And I wish you the best of luck on those 7 years because I want my cameo appearance. So good luck to you on that.
Consider this a verbal contract between you and me at scale, of course.
Heck, I'd do it for free. I probably shouldn't say that.
No. Can't have that. But if I get that show made, somebody makes that show and I do it in Pittsburgh, I'll put you in some place.
That sounds great. Marc, thank you very much. Good luck with you on the stand-up and everything else you're doing. Really appreciate it. Thank you again.
You take care, man.
A big thank you goes out to Marc Sheffler for joining us here on One with Bill Alexander. Had a great time talking to him about his childhood growing up in the city of Pittsburgh. We also talked to him about his stand-up career and also his script writing career for TV programs, and wishing him the best of luck on his new project called Those 7 Years, which are about those 7 years of his life when he made a decision that he was going to be on the screen at the Stanley Theater, and he was in the movie The Last House on the Left. Well, that's going to wrap it up for yours truly, Bill Alexander. We'll talk to you next time here on One with Bill Alexander.
Thank you for listening to One with Bill Alexander. One with Bill Alexander is a $1 Million Baby production. For more information, go to BillAlexander.net.